Hey, welcome back for another episode of the Gordon Report. Uh, couldn't come at a better time. One another crazy month. We're in the middle of May 2020, and the jobs report, unemployment still at record lows. Unemployment claims are pretty low. Job openings are at record highs. Jobs
Yes.
are at record highs. You name it, and we've got inflation that seems to be out of control. 40 years. You, everybody on this call, Ann and Ed, I know, have experienced this before. So we've had this, but for really two generations, they've never experienced what we're going through. So the good news is we've lived through this before. Bad news is, do we have any better answers and better solutions? And hopefully we're going to hear about that today. So it's good to see you, Ed and Ann. Welcome back to Gordon Report. You're a veteran now, right?
Right.
So, Ed, I'm going to turn this over to you because you've worked with Ann for a number of years. I'm really excited to hear Ann's viewpoints on everything we're going to talk about today, and especially with their new book, Open Stance. It really parallels with a lot of the work that I'm doing with the adaptability and growth mindset. So excited to dig into this. But Ed, I'll turn this over to you, and you can do your little bit of background and intro for Ann.
Well, let's make this quick because Ann has a lot to tell us. We've been talking about retains now for many, many months. And one of the keys of getting these collaborative hubs started is that key of collaboration, being open-minded. And right now we're in an era where confrontation, the enemy's list, seems to be at the top of the agenda of our culture. Ann von Eron, I met her in an author's seminar a few years ago now, right, Ann?
Yeah.
And she is a specialist in working with diverse groups, such as through the UN, through the World Bank, through major corporations, and getting people who basically hate each other's guts to sit down at the table and start listening to each other and come up with a vision and implement the vision. Now, she also walks on water and flies through the air. She has wings. So she's a miracle worker. No. Ann is a very astute professional who spent her whole life in coming up with workable ways to get people to listen to each other and to come to a collaborative solution to problems. And the workforce right now is in a mess, and we need collaboration, not confrontation. So, Ann, the first question I want to ask you is how do we overcome this closed-minded resistance behavior and move people toward open-minded conversations? Tell us something about that.
Right. Well, thank you, Ed and Ira. I'm glad to be here with you today. And I haven't had that kind of introduction where saying everybody hates their guts, but it's fairly true that I've experienced that. And actually, funny that you say that. I started my search for this, how to work with this, actually from parents who saw the world totally opposite. So from my young childhood, being the oldest of 6 children, having parents seeing the world differently, I've been thinking about this question and have spent my career on it. And I do believe there are some answers, and I've seen some results. But first of all, just the fact that we are closing right now, given the introduction Ira said, is just, it's human nature to close. So we are, and to be closed, we want to be in control. We feel out of control, the environment right now. I just got a text from someone saying, is the world collapsing? It feels that way for many of us. So how do we accept that this closing is a natural part? People want to control. They want to, figure out things. So they close and they think they're protecting themselves. But how do we create this open-mindedness? It's actually counterintuitive. So if you remember the old days when you were having like an arm wrestling with one person, so one person pushes, the other one naturally pushes back. So the more I push, the more they push. The more I push, the more they push. But if I kind of relax, stop pushing, it's no more fun for them. They stop pushing. And so the simpleness is counterintuitive. We have to be the one. Somebody has to take the move to be open, to be curious. It's a mindset to be and to be empathetic and be wondering, I wonder why they have such a different view than me, and how do I manage my own reaction when I feel threatened or that's our biggest issue. So it's much this mindset. I know you're doing a lot of work on this, Ira. Mindset is critical for culture change, and critical for the larger culture change and cultural change in companies and even in families. So we have to and the issue comes down to a very simple one with respect. We all want to be respected, but the interesting thing is we all have very different ideas of what respect is. We think everybody should want the same thing I do. But like, give you a simple example in a company, somebody, the tension, I'm often called in because there's tension. And the simple came down to a person was not greeting other people. And this is when we were in the office full time. And from her, she was being respectful because she thought she didn't like to be interrupted. So she chose not to interrupt other people, but she failed to tell people what she was doing. And then other people thought she was rude, and then they became rude, and then the other person became rude. And pretty soon we have a very difficult culture. And it happens all the time. The senior team I'm working with, again, something small. They didn't include me in that meeting. They never discuss these things. They feel disrespected. They start acting it out. And we have, it evolves to a war. Then they have to call a consultant in. So it's a very simple thing. Everybody has a different definition of respect. And we need to ourselves look at what's happening within us and shift to be in this. And we need to have openness and have conversations.
Well, now you've perfected a step-by-step approach that you implement within organizations and between groups. Could you sort of outline these steps first, and then maybe we'll drill down a little bit more into a particular one?
Okay, thank you. I call it the OASIS process, and it's very simple. It's the way people work. And how I developed it was years ago. I was doing work in companies related to diversity, trying to create a culture of diversity, and everybody was obviously had bias about the other. And I thought if we could just get these people to talk, because I was doing all kinds of focus groups with different groups, and so I just put together a very simple process which integrates a lot of theory, and it's called OASIS. And I've tested all over the world with the UN, the World Bank, many companies. For 30 years I've tested this, and it's pretty well proven. So very simple would be the letters. It's the O for observation. What am I noticing? And then A, I become aware. What are my assumptions, my emotions, and my background? And then I have to stop, step back, shift to be open. And then I have to figure out I is what's important to me, what's important to you, what's important to us. And the final S is solution. Given our options, what are we going to do? So I separate the I from what's important, understanding, from solution. We tend to want to jump right to solution, which is where a lot of our problems happen. My way's right. No, my way's right. So O is really separating. It's simple, but for example, say a person comes late 3 times to a meeting. My observation is they're coming 30 minutes late to a staff meeting. But my assumption is they don't care. They're trying to disrespect me. They're not committed to the team. So I have to separate the observation, the facts, from my assumption. And then I have to say, okay, this is my assumption, but what's my emotion? I feel angry, or I feel hurt, or I'm worried we're not going to get our project done. And my background is what's contributing, because I had somebody before, this happened to me before, and then I failed on the project. Or, I think I had a background where you should tell people if they're going to be late, or I was drilled into me from my family, never be late. So then the biggest thing is stop. I have to catch myself. Whereas I feel like judging them, and I know I'm right. That's when I have to catch it. And I think we have a physiological signal to say stop, step back, and then I have to shift into this open state, this is very critical. This is the secret, to be open. And then I do what most people know. I give empathy to them. I say, hey, you're late. I notice you're coming. What's going on? I don't yell. And they say, hey, don't you remember I'm going to a training program, man? You're my boss. I told you about it. I'm like, hey, I don't remember. I wish you told me. Oh, I told you in that memo. I remember. Oh, I didn't read that memo. So what's important to you then is going to the training program. What's important to me is that we get your input so that we can solve our team problem. So then we look at what's important to you, what's important to me. It's important to me that the team functions. We both have the importance to get the project done. It's going to be effective. So how do we get reframed? So what's important? You need to go to the training program to get your certificate. I need your input. We both want the team to function well. And then we go to the last S. What are our options? What can we do? And then we just explore, and we say, you can call in, You can have another person read your notes. We can change the time of the meeting. We agree on what we're going to do. And here's where the accountability comes in. What are we going to do? When? How do we know? We're going to change the time of the meeting for the next 3 sessions. So it's very simple. I have it written on on an infographic, and people literally follow it along and tell me all the time that they're solving big issues. Simple.
Now you have a whole book about this, don't you?
I do. That's called OASIS Conversations. I have a book.
That's how we first met. You had your book. I was looking at it. I've read your book.
Thank you.
Now you've gone a step beyond that now with Open Stance.
Thank you. So
what is that? How you refined it? Go ahead.
No, OASIS is about how to have conversations with others who have different perspectives. But the key of that is that middle S, shifting, being able to catch ourselves and shift. And that's noticing when we're reactive, stopping, stepping back, cooling down, and shifting to being open. So that little muscle is what the Open Stance book is about. How do we build? It's our internal conversation. It's my internal mindset. What do I say to myself that allows me to shift to that openness? And I have what I call the Open Stance postures, which are about 8 ways that people can be open. And they're very simple things that people can do, because I know my clients are busy. So how do they, it's simple things like grounding ourselves, keep on coming back to my body and get out of my head more spinning and be in my body and be present. Or it could be be optimistic, trying to think about what could be good about this situation. With the person being late, maybe it's great. Maybe some other people are speaking up. Maybe, so look, being optimistic, connecting with gratefulness, connecting with the values, or most important, being curious, just getting back to that, how would an anthropologist see this? Being compassionate, being courageous, or even taking kind action. So those are some of the ways. There are many ways to be open. Right. People have to have the commitment to doing it. And then they want it. Why do people want to be open? Because you know what? It's a better way to live. So it's not only better for personally to be healthier, and research shows that all of our health issues are related to immune issues. But
so when you begin working with a company or in a community of many different organizations, you first teach them these strategies as you go through it, so that everyone's attempting to do this, so that it's not like I'm enlightened, so I'll listen to Ann, and I'm going to sit here with my arms crossed and say, well, that's a lot of nonsense. I don't give a damn about it. How do you get everyone on board to follow these steps? I guess that's my.
Well, I mean, I do have a program that's like a workshop. I do it virtually, and I help once people have an experience like, wow, I thought it was X, but now I'm seeing it really as Y, or they see the benefit, like, oh, they see the benefit. Really what happens is I do this workshop over time, and I give people little assignments to try things, and they're shocked because, like, for example, recently a manager said, well, I was in a meeting and I wanted my process to go and the other people wanted their process, and we've been fighting. Oh, well, I'll try this Open Stance stuff. So he tried, he stepped back, he was curious, he tried to be open. He said they solved it in a few minutes. They spent months on this issue, and it was his shifting from kind of this energy. So it's really kind of an energetic shift, but it's an intention to be curious. There's a great power in being curious. And so I basically, I'm not a teller either. I'm like, try it out, see if this works for you. And then I give people experiences, and it's pretty powerful. I mean, I do different things. If I'm working with a team like that needs to change the culture, like a leadership team, we're practicing talking to each other, so it's not, in that case, I do have a workshop where I just teach people the process. They go back, they try it, they come back, and they have to share what they're learning, how it's working for them. And it's really Open Stance. I didn't call it Open Mindset this time. I called it Open Stance because it's really an embodiment. It's having the intention of being open, and you have to feel this openness kind of in your body. So it's kind of a little different for some people, but once they get it. So I do give people the workshop, but I also work with real live teams. That's where, we actually practiced. We actually talk about the real issues. So in that case, that's how we change the culture. We're talking about what's happening in their culture.
And can I jump in with a question here for Ann?
Sure.
So we're in the midst of this great recession, or great reshuffle, or great reassignment, or great reawakening, what everybody wants to call it. And another 4.5 million people quit their jobs. 60 million people quit their jobs. Nothing new. I mean, the three of us probably said this is the same old stuff. It's just that the curtain got ripped back after the last 2 years, and just the shortage of labor. People now have options and choices, and they're fed up with it. And then there was recently there was an MIT Sloan survey that was released, and they indicated that toxic corporate cultures. So we're talking about confrontation and animosity and that butting heads. Toxic work culture is 10 times more, has 10.4 times the impact
Absolutely.
of people leave of attrition than compensation.
Yeah,
and insecurity was even more. So we're throwing money at the problem to fix this, but it's really confrontation, company culture, trying to build community, and something that you mentioned just at the beginning, and you started, and it was a great example. We just talked to somebody, Mita Malik, who talks a lot about diversity and inclusion. We had her on our podcast the other day, and she talked about gaslighting. And one of the things with gaslighting was just that similar to the example that you gave, is that somebody slided because they wasn't included in the meeting. And I might be viewing it as, well, I didn't want to bother. I mean, we were just reviewing things, and there was just a small item on the agenda. But the fact that I wasn't even asked to participate thinks that I'm excluded. So there's this whole psychological safety space, which has been seriously injured. And so I'm wondering, I mean, as you're talking about what we can do as individuals, what I can do, I can develop this open stance. But how do we, I guess, change the culture? How do you create that environment? How do you create, ultimately, the goal will be that you will have a more psychologically safe space. But because it's not even available now, how do you start with that? How do you get even people to be comfortable with that? Because we all agree at the end point, open stance is what we want to go to.
Right.
How do we get people to take that micro step?
Well, how do you get people enlightened, in other words, to think about this?
Or take a chance.
Right.
Willing to take a chance and try it.
I have to say, I don't think it's just exactly what you just said. It is so, people, we've known about it, but now companies are experiencing this. I have clients that have 25% turnover right now. Right. Okay, so that is a business need to change the culture quickly. So, I mean, I've been doing this for many years, and I've done a lot with diversity. We know we need to, but now there's more pressure on companies to show they're doing it. So, there is actually finally, there's more need now than ever, and just with all the tumultuousness. So, what I've been doing, and I've done culture change different ways, but so usually, honestly, it's one enlightened leader, and the leaders that think, and they say, well, let's give it a try. They hear from somebody else is how I get my work, but they say, well, or they read the book and they're like, let's give it a try, or it's really the pain point is high. I mean, you're saying it right now that when they're having so much turnover, why are people leaving? They're saying it very clearly. We want an empathetic culture. We want a collaborative culture. So the work that's taking an open stance. We want psychological safety. So that's why companies are now saying, and why other groups are saying we need to do it. And they don't know how to do it. But but what I've been doing now is sometimes I've done culture change. Start at the top. We have a whole team. We have a big process. We have all kind of activities. But I'm actually saying it's everybody's responsibility now to create this psychological safety. It's like every leader has to start now and try it, even if they weren't trained in it. What I do is give them the experience in the workshop, so they get to feel, oh, this is nice. This feels good that we're talking to peers and we're not competing in the moment. And of course, that's in a workshop or a peer process. But so the way to do it is to have the experience like we're having right now. I feel like we're pretty open with each other, right? That's the kind of psychological safety we're looking for. We know it when we see it, so we have to give people the experience of it, and then let them learn. These are learnable skills. They're learnable skills,
right?
And people see the need now. So that's the issue. You have to have the need, You have to practice. I don't know if I answered your question. Did I?
Yeah. Well, and I have another one. I mean, so you mentioned, I mean, the three of us are having this dialogue and we feel pretty open and we can have a conversation. But a lot of there's really this confrontation going on right now about hybrid versus remote versus in person.
Yeah.
And you know, the one of the leaders at Apple just resigned the other day because he didn't see the point. He wasn't involved in the conversation about going to hybrid work. Have you seen an uptick, or have you had more involvement with companies that are trying to make this shift and figure it out, how to create the culture? Because a lot of companies are just looking at it as a workspace effort, not as a culture issue of going remote.
Yeah, I mean, I think the ones I'm working with are seeing it more. I mean, that's probably why I'm working with them. But I do think more people are realizing we have to change the culture, but it's really complicated and they don't know how to do it. I don't think there are many, not all of them are approaching it that way. I mean, there are still heads of companies that I've talked to and they're like, we want everybody in. Like, you can't think that way. You know, I mean, you're not paying attention to, you know, and people are leaving. You're going to let these good people leave. So some people are just a little bit, you know, they're not open-minded and they have to, and we need each, and then we have another whole issue. When you're more senior, people don't often really tell them the truth, you know, of how serious this is. I mean, it's not that hard to find out now if you read the papers and listen to your material. But I think there's still, you know, we're very, I don't know, you've all heard that old myth about the frog in the water, you know, that you put a frog in hot water. It takes a while. None of us want to, we don't think we're wrong, especially if we've gotten there as a senior leader. We think our way is right. You know, think about, remember the old Blackberries, you know, that was like an amazing machine and a brilliant person, but couldn't accept that this might have to change to have a, you know, be a phone, you know, whatever. And they went out of business, and we can name a lot of those companies. So it's not intellect. It's really this idea of being curious. And we have to all say, no one knows any more of the answers. I mean, I think that's a big shift. It used to be managers were command and control. They knew it. No, now I say it to all the managers. You don't know the answers. You have to say, I don't know what I don't know. And none of us know. I don't know. None of us know. But that creates psychological safety. If we can say, we don't know, let's experiment and try, and let's try something else.
Now that brings up my end of the conversation here.
Yeah. All right.
So we have these community groups that contact me. Right now, I have a number of them. As Ira just said, we have an all-time high of vacant jobs. I think it's more like 13 to 14 million vacant jobs. We predict 30 million by the end of the decade if we don't change the system of education to employment. Okay, so companies, organizations do hire me. And right now I'm negotiating with several of them. They want me to give them the big picture. So I do that. And I show them how things are going to get worse, not get better as this decade goes forward due to a number of technological and demographic and, in all honesty, a political stubbornness upon people who think they have the answer and they're not going to change it. So I show them why the current methods we're using aren't working. And then I show them how these other retain type groups that already exist worked, how they got someone who was enlightened. And I push that as the second step. I can give you awareness. I can show you there is a system you can use to actually drill down and come up with your own solution for your region, which will be unique to you. And that's part of the alignment, this open stance that you're talking about, and coming up with a vision that everyone can live with to help to fill their vacant jobs right now. That's the big thing companies want from me. How do I fill those vacant jobs? Now, of course, they want instant results. That's out of the question. But we can give them something that will give them relief over a reasonable time period, and then show them how to do it. All right. There are plenty of people. We do know the variations on it. But the key is what you're talking about, getting people to the point to say, well, I'm in a bind right now. Maybe I should consider this process to solve this problem. Is that right, Ann?
Absolutely. I mean, and I think the person you interviewed on your last month was showing his excitement, and we have to all think enterprise-wide perspective, larger ecosystem, larger system. That's part of the mindset change. We have to think bigger. And the point is, we can't do it. No one can do it alone in that kind of groups. So this is maybe pushing people to try it and to be open and to try the experiment. But collectively, it's fun. It's actually fun when you get the different people working together. It's energizing. It's motivational, and you'll be surprised because none of us has the answer. It's like a puzzle piece. And I work in companies, and everybody has their own business. Like a bigger company each have their own divisions, and they're all fighting each other. And they come in once they, collectively look at what we're trying to do. They get better market share. Everybody wins. So we have to be thinking that, but it's scary if you haven't done it before and you think, I know what I'm doing if I just keep. But now we know they can't. So I think that it's wide open, and you have examples, like the North Carolina group. And it's
and there are many others that we have in future jobs and in
you've been on this for so long.
Right.
I really want to, and you've been out there pushing it, and we want to really appreciate that. And that's been hard on you, I think.
Well, in some ways, what we're doing, guys, is we're helping people understand the perspective of another person.
Yeah.
And then have them understand our perspective and come together and come up with this grand collaboration, right?
Exactly. And I think people have to also see what's in it for me. And now they're seeing it. I think sometimes it feels like, oh, that project's that's such a big issue. But now I think the time is right. None of us are going to make it if we don't collaborate.
Yeah.
If we don't. And it's an old school way of fighting, and it's not working. The combat's not working. And so let's try the collaboration. It's messy. I'm not going to pretend it's all smooth and easy. It's messy, but it's worth it. It's fun, and it's energizing, and you make a bigger impact, which is which we're all about.
Yeah, I know we're coming up toward the end of this, but it's just super interesting. On our podcast the other day, Geek Skeezers and Googleization, we talked with Scott Novus from a company called Game Truck. He does video gaming, and it was like, how do you get people to create a fresh narrative? But you said something, Ann, that was so important, that we think this is natural. It's like people know how to do this. And he said, if we think about Gen Z, that 70% of Gen Z drops out of team sports by the time they're 11 years old. And that was from the Aspen Institute. So the next time that they're introduced to the idea of collaboration and team is when they get a job.
Wow.
And so because of sports and because of whether you want to blame it on technology or isolation, and then especially over the last 2 years, we didn't teach people how to do even something as basic as being on a team. So again, and there's been adults, and we talk about team building all the time, but team building and collaboration, I had a laugh when over the years I get called, and I don't do a lot of this training, but I get called for team building. Yeah. And every time it was team building, it's who do you want to fix? It's always comes down to there's somebody on our team that's not getting along or causing trouble, and we want to fix them. And that was the solution for team building. Well, collaboration is well beyond beyond just getting people to get along on a team, because they get along is they may not be confronting each other. They may not be having those crucial and honest conversations, those really hard conversations. And if there's nothing else, we need a fresh narrative. And I think that's, it sounds like, that's what.
And the best way for people to learn to do this is to try it out.
Absolutely.
In my experience teaching in higher ed, I use teams in many of my classes in college to teach my students about that subject and how to master it so they have better understanding of it. Now, next month, Ira and I will have Kevin Hollenbeck here, who was the chief economist for the W.E. Upjohn Institute of Labor Research, and he's going to talk about the work that he's done about this issue, this very issue. of trying to solve vacant jobs, better preparing youth for jobs, getting people to work together as an economist. All right. So this is important because a large part of the inflation that we can expect could very well become wage inflation as companies just start to try to bid up wages to attract talent instead of trying to create talent. You mention that to an executive and they go, because they don't want to spend any money to invest any in people. And yet they think there's this infinite pool of talent out there they can draw on. Well, that's not true. So next month, to complete this process, to continue this process of us having an open stance to our audience, we'll have Kevin talk about his viewpoint on this as a labor economist.
Great.
And thank you very much. I admire your work, your book on OASIS, come in from the desert of opposition and come into the oasis of collaboration. That is the key to life in general, not just business, but to life.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks. Good to be here with you both. Thank you.
And excuse me, the best way to get in touch with you, I assume, is through potentials.com.
Sure.
Yeah. And your book is up there as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Everybody.
Excellent.
All right. Good to be here. All right,
and you and I are going to continue to have this conversation. Right. And I'm just going to put this up because I can. Our new coaching 30-day micro learning coaching sessions are now available. The first one is about mindset, about growth mindset at aqplusmindset.com. And there's a discount code there now. We just introduced it. It'll be available through the end of June. So if you can go up there, you can get a demo if you'd like as well. Excuse me, just running out of voice here. And really, thank you very much, Ed. We're always here. Let me put up Ed's contact information just a second. There it is. Scrolling across the bottom of the screen, you can go to imperialcorp.com and reach out to Ed about the retains, and also get sign up for the newsletter, the Gordon Report. This is our video version of that. And we will be back next month to have another session. And we're living in never normal, so who knows what will change by then. But appreciate everybody being here. Thank you for all the listeners.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Take care.